Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is Eva Golnick, and I'm this year's VIP Distinguished Speaker Series Chair. Today we have Tom Gilligan, the Dean of the McCombs School of Business from the University of Texas at Austin, and Indra Nooyi, the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of Pepsico. Indra K. Nooyi is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Pepsico, which has the world's largest portfolio of billion-dollar food and beverage brands. Mrs. Nooyi was selected #1 on Fortune's Most Powerful Women in Business from 2006 to 2009, #1 on Financial Times' Top Women in Business in 2009, and #3 on Forbes' list of the world's 100 most powerful women in 2008 and 2009. Mrs. Nooyi has directed the company's global strategy and led its restructuring into the powerful young brands, and including its divestiture of the restaurants into those young brands, the acquisition of Tropicana, the merger with Quaker Oats. Prior to PepsiCo, Mrs. Nooyi held executive positions at both Asia Brown Boveri and Motorola, after she worked at the Boston Consulting Group for 6 years. Mrs. Nooyi serves as a member of several international boards, such as the U.S.-China Business Council and the U.S.-India Business Council. She was appointed to the U.S.-India CEO Forum by the Obama administration. Mrs. Nooyi began her career in India, where she held product manager positions at Johnson & Johnson and Mehta Beardstall Limited, a textile firm. She holds a BS from Madras Christian College, an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta, and a Master of Public and Private Management from Yale University. Please help me welcome Dean Gilligan and Indra Nooyi.
Thank you.
Well, Indra, welcome. We're very glad you're joining us today. I just want to say a personal thanks to you and your colleagues at PepsiCo Frito-Lay for all that they do at the McCombs School of Business. We really appreciate the partnership.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
This is a casual conversation which is designed to help students better understand the career paths and lives of someone like yourself. Could you start by maybe telling us something about your first jobs or the way that some of your early values and traits began?
Sure. But before I begin, first, let me thank you for inviting me to speak to all of you. And I have a question, show of hands. How many of you showed up for the free food? And how many of you came to here? Nobody put their hands up, okay. Because I didn't really give you a choice. My first job, I tell you, I had an unusual childhood because I graduated from high school when I was 15. I graduated from college when I was 18. And I'd finished business school in India when I was 20. So it's kind of early to do all of that stuff. In retrospect, I regret that I raced through school and college the way I did. My first job was a brand manager for a textile company in India. It was a British textile company in India, and I was hired as a product manager for textiles. And they had a normal practice of hiring students out of the business schools in India. And the first day I showed up on the job, I was given a desk, and I was told, you're the product manager for textiles, and incidentally, you're responsible for printed fabrics. The company made plain dyed fabrics and printed fabrics. So I looked at them and said, okay, what is my job? Is it a training program? They said, no, figure it all out yourself. Figure out your training program, figure out what you have to do. I said, are there files? Are there anything that I can look back on? They said, yeah, it's in that cupboard there. I opened the cupboard and out tumbled fabric swatches, books, files. It just tumbled out. So I looked at this and I said, I'm supposed to function as a product manager for printed textiles. There's nobody to teach me what to do. And all I have is a cupboard full of the archives, all just shoved in, nothing filed. So for the first week, I decided I wasn't going to be product manager. I was going to be staff assistant, cleaner, filer, organizer, because lesson 1, if you don't sweat the details, if you don't organize yourself before you start anything, it's not going to work. So first week, I decided I had to organize every printed fabric produced by this company in some methodical way so that people after me could follow that nomenclature. It's not just for me. And then organize, quote, the office with 3 people. So I spent the first week organizing the office. And once I organized the office, I said, what do I know about textiles? Not much. So I'm going to go to school. So I went to the mill, spent almost 10 days at the mill, learning every aspect of the business. I started with the junior most guy in the mill, started with him and said, tell me your job and tell me how you do it. And I worked my way up. Every day I'd go to another department and work my way up. So until I learned every aspect of that job, I didn't come back to headquarters to be the product manager. So sweating the details, learning the business ground up was critically important. And then the first batch of prints I had to produce, after the designs were finalized, I didn't trust the organization to execute exactly on that color swatch, exactly the way I wanted it. Not because they were bad people, but because of so much writing on these printed fabrics. So I went to the mill that was producing the printed fabrics. They were running these batches in the night. I'd sit down on the roller with the dyes and compare it against the swatches. I was so obsessed with everything having to be perfect. And so I tell you, the lessons I learned from my first job, and they've carried through with me even today, is whatever job you have, sweat the details. Second, be a student. Go deep before you go wide. Because if you don't understand every aspect of the job from the ground up, you can never be a credible leader. And depend on the people in the organization to teach you the job. I can't tell you how many mill workers taught me the job, how many wholesalers, retailers taught me how business was done, but I had to ask. All that I had to do is tell them, I'm a student, teach me the job. Today we have organized training programs. In those days, they didn't exist. You just made it up as you went along. And I think being a student, being willing to learn, being open to exposing yourself and saying, I don't know, really made a big difference.
That's amazing. Well, you've had an incredible career. Apart from your attention to detail, what do you think has set you apart from your peers throughout the career to give you the opportunities you have today?
Yeah. The first lesson I'd say, the first learning, focus on the job that you're doing. Don't run for office. Don't say to yourself, I really want the job 2 levels above me, because the day you walk into a job and focus on the next job or the next job, you're spending more time worrying about how to get there as opposed to how to nail the job you're doing. You know, my grandfather would always say to me, if you're given a job, do it better than anybody else so that your boss says to you, I never have to check your work. I never have to look at what you've done, because if you've done it, it's got your seal of approval. And I remember in Pepsico in particular, when we were doing the restaurant spin-off, I wrote all the work in preparation for the spin-off. And you know, I would check everything, go through the presentations in great detail. I took it to the CEO and I said, Roger, here's the deck that we're going to show to the board of directors. Would you like to read it? And he looked at it and said, I'll get to it. I went back the next day and said, have you read it? He said, no, I'm not going to read it. I said, but you got it. It's a 4-hour presentation to your bosses. Please read it. He looked at me and he said, if you have checked it, if you have gone through the deck, there's nothing more I can add to it. And so I think it's that confidence that you have to instill in the people that you work for, that you're only focused on the job you've got, and you're going to do such a good job with it that everybody else can depend on you. And I'd say the first lesson I learned, don't run for office. Do what you're doing, do it well, and then what you do is redefine your job. Some people ask me, why do you work so hard? Is it the job that's overwhelming you? I said, it's not the job, it's me. Because if I were a janitor in a building, I'd run the building within a week with the same wage as a janitor. It's not because of anything else. Once you do that job very well, you're also thinking about how this job interacts with every other function around you. So you're automatically looking at the linkages. So the other thing that I think got me to where I am today is that I was always looking to see the impact of my work on the rest of the company, and constantly looking to see how I can help those pieces of the department work better with us.
Now, some coworkers in an environment like that might be threatened or uncomfortable with an employee like you, who is always worrying about their backyard and not your backyard. Did you ever encounter conflicts in organizations because of the way you're concerned for the whole organization?
I think people actually reached out to help you, because at the end of the day, if all of us are focused on the success of the company, people don't care whether you're encroaching on their territory, because they know you're not encroaching on their territory because you want to knock them out of the job. You're encroaching on their territory because you feel there's an overlap between what you're doing and what they're doing. And together we can do better by the company. So I think, where's Dave Rader? Dave, where are you? Show of hands. There's Dave Rader. Dave Rader is a UT Austin alumnus. And I mean, there are many times that I encroached on Dave Rader's territory, but Dave always stepped up and said, I'm going to mentor her because I want to make sure that what she does and how she extends into my territory together helps PepsiCo get to a better place. So I think people just stepped up to the plate and said, let's see how we can help her do better.
Perfect.
Every step of the way, that's what I felt.
I see. Interesting. Are there some things you haven't yet mastered that you'd like to?
Plenty. I'd like to learn to play the guitar. I haven't mastered it. I want to learn ballroom dancing. I stink at it. I mean, there's so many things. I've got to learn to be a better mom. I think I'm an average mom. There's lots more to learn. If you ask my husband, he'll say, you haven't learned how to be a wife as yet. But leaving all that aside, I feel I come to work every day saying, I wish I could be a better leader. I wish I could bring the human side of CEOship more to the people. I wish there were 60 hours in a day, not 24, because there's so many more people to reach out to, so many more issues to study. So if you say to yourself that I've learned everything I can, I think that's the day I need to step down as being CEO.
What is PepsiCo doing in today's market to meet the challenges of growth and serving your clients?
Well, you know, from a growth perspective, geographical growth is huge. I mean, we have opportunities all over the world. The convenience boom is taking shape everywhere in the world. Emerging markets, I mean, there are 220 countries in the world we should be participating in. So we have lots of geographic growth. I think even in the United States and developed markets where the per capita consumption is high, there's even more opportunities to make the inconvenient convenient, but do it in a healthy way. And so the shift to nutritious products is big, and we're doing a lot of that. And then going into adjacent categories, the markets are changing all around us. And I think PepsiCo is looking for every which way to get into new products, new services, new adjacencies. That's what we're doing.
I see. If you look at PepsiCo, it looks like a company that's trying very hard to align its assets, like the foundation, towards what might be called the public sentiments or social values associated with nutritious products or access to clean water, things like that. And that's been a large initiative of yours, I know. Could you talk a little bit more about that plank in the strategy of PepsiCo?
So one of the things that, I grew up in India as an emerging market. And, life there was tough growing up. And I grew up in Madras in India, which was extremely water-starved. I remember days when my mom would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and find every pot and pan in the house to fill water because the central water supply released water to homes only for 2 hours. And every morning when the kids got up, we were given 2 buckets and said, this is your 2 buckets for the day. For everything, for your toiletries, for your clothes, for bathing, everything, these are the 2 buckets. Figure out how you can work. So I grew up in an environment which was water-starved. There was shortage everywhere. So when I came to PepsiCo and became CEO, I had deep in my mind the notion that big companies can be a force for good in societies because big companies bring technology, big companies can bring resources, and big companies can help address problems of many governments and societies. And in turn, if societies succeed, companies can succeed. And so I realized that there was a great relationship between the two. The second, if you look at every corporation, we operate under the laws of limited liability. And the reason we operate under the laws of limited liability globally is because we owe every society a duty of care. That is the expectation. Too often, companies have forgotten that we owe society a duty of care, right? So I wanted us to go back to those roots. PepsiCo was already there. I wanted us to embed those roots into PepsiCo. So the PepsiCo operating philosophy is about performance with purpose. How can we as the company deliver great performance while also doing right by society? Now, be careful, it's not performance and purpose or performance or purpose. It's performance with purpose. And the way we crafted purpose was such that if you didn't deliver on the performance, on the purpose commitments, you couldn't deliver performance. And if you didn't deliver performance, you couldn't fund purpose. So purpose had 3 planks. The first plank was what we call human sustainability. We made products that were fun for you, but society was changing. We knew we had to change the portfolio. So we said, we are going to balance the portfolio so that the fun for you moved to better for you by removing the negatives. And then we add a healthy chunk of nutritious products so that it's catering to societies, the changing lifestyles. So the first plank was human sustainability. And while doing that, we added a plank which said our duty is also to serve the undernourished of the world. We shouldn't just be worried about overnutrition, we should be worried about undernutrition. So we started active projects to feed the very, very bottom of the pyramid. The second part of the plank was environmental sustainability. Now, we use water, we have a carbon footprint. We knew that we couldn't continue to use water in a Pepsi plant if in Madras there's no water to take a bath or to cook. So our plants not only had to become water neutral, but we had to help communities do rainwater harvesting and bring our global resources to communities. So the second plank was all about environmental sustainability within the four walls of the PepsiCo plants, but also in every community we served. And this was global. And the third part, which was my favorite, was about talent sustainability. How do we make every employee in PepsiCo bring their whole selves to work? We recognize that every person is first a daughter, son, mother, father, husband, wife. And too often we were asking people to park themselves at the door, come in as a PepsiCo employee, and then pick themselves up when they went home. It doesn't work that way because people feel wonderful working for a company that recognizes that the community has to be enriched, that they as people have to be taken care of in terms of recognizing that they have families to take care of, they have family issues to be dealt with. So we wanted to change the environment in PepsiCo radically. We were already a great company, but change it even more so that our employees truly felt they could bring their whole selves to work. And we wanted to change the way we did people development, talent management, so that it took into effect all of these issues of people. For example, we don't do development plans anymore for 2 or 3 years. We look at 10-year and 15-year development plans. So an employee comes in, and let's say they have 3 kids, and the kids are 5, 6, and 7 years old. We sit down now with the employee and say, when your kids get to high school, in which school system do you want to be in? The international system, the US system, the British system, the Indian system, which system? At that point, we know where we need to land them. Then we work backwards. Between now and then, which countries do we have to rotate them through? What experiences do we have to give them? Do they have aging parents they have to take care of? So now we are beginning to think of people development in a whole different way. Now, what's the logic? If we don't transform our portfolio, we can't deliver the numbers. If we're not environmentally prudent, NGOs and governments will shut us down. And if we don't have the best people who can bring their whole selves to work, we won't have the right talent base to feed performance going forward. So it's this virtuous circle that resulted in performance with purpose. So my legacy is that when I leave PepsiCo, I want people to look back and say, PepsiCo was indeed the good company, good commercially, but also good ethically.
Interesting. What, back a little bit to yourself, what's the best piece of advice you were ever given to manage your career?
Given or gotten?
Given. You gotten. What's the best advice you were given or you got?
Oh, the best piece of advice I got is what I started with. I never forget the words that my grandfather would said, just do the job you've got well. Do not worry about the next job. It'll come automatically. If you do the job you were given exceedingly well. Too often I find that too many people are in my office saying, what's my next job? When am I going to get it? Do your existing job well, and don't spend so much time worrying about the next job. It will take care of itself. I said, if more people think of it that way, trust me, I think progression will be quite easy.
Interesting. This next question is very important to a lot of the students in here. What makes a person stand out to you when you talk to them and you think about putting them on the Pepsico team?
As an entering executive or a senior executive?
Let's start, say, as an entry executive, and then we can move on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the downsides of my job is that I don't see enough entry-level people, except when, they're in roundtables with me. Sure. But let me generally speak about what draws you to somebody. Anybody who I sort of get excited about is somebody who has raw intelligence, raw competence, because if somebody doesn't have the core horsepower, there's no point trying to spend any time with them, because from a business perspective, they can be friends, but You know what I mean. So the core horsepower has to be there. What do I mean by core horsepower? You've got to be damn good at something. You've got to have a hip pocket skill that you're very, very, very good at. A generalist is usually not very good. Okay? So decide what you want to focus on, be very, very good at it, and be a lifelong student at it. You know, constantly read about it, reach out to people, go beyond the boundaries of that skill, but fine-tune that skill. Make sure you have the breadth, but make sure you have the depth. The second thing that draws me to people is, are they courageous? Do they have confidence? Because a lot of people who are brilliant, if you don't have the courage to speak up, it doesn't matter. And how do we look for that? When you ask somebody to give a point of view, the kind of people I cannot stand are people who say, well, it could be option A or option B. It could be this or could be this. What kind of an answer is that? You know, I asked you for a point of view. I know it could be black or white, but what is your point of view? What color is this? You know, a lot of people who don't want to give you an answer because they want to know what you want to hear as an answer. Right. I don't want people who want to tell me the time after borrowing my watch. I want them to tell me, looking at the sun and the stars, what the time could be. So I want people who have the courage and the confidence to put themselves out on a limb. The third thing I look for is communication skills. You know, you never follow somebody or never bet on somebody who cannot articulate what they're thinking, but articulate it in a compelling, engaging way. Because that's what it takes all the time. I mean, I can tell you on an average day, I'm talking to 5 groups of employees or some outside group all the time. And in every case, you're convincing them to do something they never thought they needed to do when they walked into your office. So you've got to have complete ability to communicate to them with courage, with confidence, based on your competence. So it all links together. Right. The fourth thing we look for is consistency. Do you shift your point of view with the winds, or do you actually believe in something and defend that position? We look very carefully to see if you're consistent, because if you're one of these wishy-washy kinds, then nobody's going to follow you. And the last one, which is hard to test for, but you do it through role-playing, is do you have integrity? We, you know, typically in interview processes, we give you difficult situations to role-play and see how you would resolve that situation. And that's really a test of integrity. So to me, it's competence, courage and confidence, communication, consistency, and the moral compass, which really decides whether somebody belongs in Pepsico or not.
Interesting. Well, Indra, thank you so much. Now is the time of the program where there's a lot of risk involved. Students are going to ask you questions. There's a little logistics here. There are 2 microphones in the middle of the room. Those of you who want to ask a question, just please come up to the microphone and queue up, and we'll get to you when we can. We're going to begin by asking Chris Schultz, who's a junior in our business honors program, to ask the first question. And those of you who want to ask additional questions, please just stand up at one of the microphones.
Hi, Indra. I just first want to thank you for being here and sharing all your knowledge with us. It's awesome. My question is that I know Pepsi drinks sat out of last year's Super Bowl ads, where they had used to be the #1 Super Bowl ad provider, to kind of put money into their community service program called Project Refresh. And I was wondering if that initiative was a success, and if you see that becoming more and more involved as you move into the future.
Great question. So let me tell you a bit about our controversial decision to pull out a Super Bowl last year and our, according to the media, wonderful decision to re-enter the Super Bowl in a big way this year, and then Pepsi Refresh, okay? In 2010, and coming out of 2009, we looked at the economy, we looked at the state of affairs, and we saw the number of grants grant requests we were getting to our Pepsi Foundation, but for small amounts of money, you know, for little community projects, et cetera, et cetera. So our team sat down and said, given the state of the economy, wouldn't it be nice if we could give away a lot of our dollars to these communities who are desperately in need for small amounts of money, right? And so was born the Pepsi Refresh project. When we launched Pepsi Refresh, I'm sure, how many of you don't know about Pepsi Refresh? Oh my God, where have you been? All right. So Pepsi Refresh project was, you go online to the Pepsi Refresh site, you make a submission for a worthwhile cause, and you can apply for either a 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000, 100, 125, 250,000 grant. And every month we gave out 17 grants and a certain number for every dollar amount. And basically all these projects lined up, and then you got everybody to vote on it. And whoever had the highest number of votes got the grants, right? So it was a democratic process. There was an independent judging committee that decided whether one was a slick NGO that was campaigning for the votes, which we didn't like. It had to be real grassroots organizations. So let me tell you what we decided. We decided we're going to give the money away. But we also said we're not going to measure volume every quarter and see if there's an uptick, because these sorts of projects never result in volume growth in the first quarter. So we said we're going to stay with this project the whole year, whether volume goes up or not. So that was a conscious decision we made. Was it successful? Let me give you some numbers. From a sales perspective, it was very hard to isolate whether it was successful or not. From a Super Bowl perspective, the Pepsi Refresh project and the fact that we stayed out of the Super Bowl generated 3 times as much media coverage versus had we stayed in the Super Bowl, okay? Which is not very good for the NFL, but it also haloed on the NFL, right? Second, the first month, in the Pepsi Refresh project, we accept 1,000 submissions every month. Then we put it out to vote. So people, there might be more than 1,000 submissions, and we cherry pick 1,000 based on the depth of the project. The first month, we had in 17 hours 1,000 submissions. And we were worried whether we'd get 1,000 submissions the next month, okay? The second month, we had 1,000 submissions in 17 minutes. Last month, we had the submissions opened at 12 midnight. 12 midnight and 17 seconds, we had 1,000 submissions. And there's a backlog of somewhere between 35 and 40,000 projects waiting to be submitted. So there is a groundswell of projects out there that are dying to be submitted. What are the kinds of projects? I met one of the groups that got a $5,000 grant. This was a young kid in Florida, a little girl in Florida, middle school I think, or maybe a sophomore in high school, who has a sister or a brother who's disabled. I think sister. And the sister always wanted to be in a cheerleading squad. Could never be on a cheerleading squad because she wasn't up to snuff. So she decided she was going to start a cheerleading squad for disabled kids. She put it out to vote. She got a $5,000 grant. Think about the emotion on the project. And if you go into Pepsi Refresh or refresheverything.com and you browse through these projects, I swear to God, you will have tears in your eyes before you're through the 5th project. You know the amazing thing about the team at Pepsi? If you want to submit a project to get votes, they will even walk you through how to prepare your dossier to submit it. So we actually have a group that teaches you how to submit it. So this was an unbelievable project, consistent with performance and purpose, consistent with the soul of PepsiCo. We're going to go global with this project starting next year, and we're going to continue it in the United States because it has so much pent-up need.
Thank you.
Could you identify yourself too, please?
Testing. Nooyi, thank you so much for being here. Somewhere that you are a sari to your first consulting group interview. What your thoughts are on diversity in corporate America and what you're doing specifically to implement that in PepsiCo.
Yeah. You know, the fact that I wore a sari for my first interview was out of necessity. Because when I was a student at Yale in the business school, I had no money, okay? Summer job time came, I had $50 to buy an outfit. And nobody buys an outfit for $50. And in those days, Yale didn't have a support system. The business school didn't have a support system for people like me. This was 3 years into the business school, and $50, I was too afraid to go to somebody to ask for help. So I went to the local Kmart, and I found a pair of pants, because I'd never worn a skirt before. So I found a pair of pants, and I looked at the fitting room, and it had a curtain and not a door, and I was afraid people could peek in, so I decided not to try these clothes. And my mom's words came to me. She said, always buy clothes 2 sizes bigger than you, you'll grow into it. So I sort of held up, because you know, when you don't have that much money, you know, you always stitch things a little bit looser, and you hope the kids grow into it. So I bought clothes that are a bit bigger. I didn't try the trousers on. I ran out of money for shoes, so I decided to wear my snow boots with it. It was a pretty ugly scene. So I showed up in my first interview with a jacket 2 sizes too big, with a trouser about an inch above my ankle, because I didn't realize when you held it up, it wasn't quite how you wore it. And then these snow boots that I was tucking under the table right through the interview. And when people saw me, they sort of gave a collective gasp. There was sort of a seizure of sorts, because this was a pretty ugly sight. But I needed the summer job, because if I didn't have a summer job, I didn't have money to live. So I went into the development office and said, Jane, look at me. Why are people laughing? She said, because you look like a freak show. You know, this is not the way to dress. This is not the way to dress. I mean, you got to do something different. I said, I used up my $50. I don't have any money. And she said, what would you wear for an interview if you were in India? I said, I'd wear saris. I have lots of saris with me. She said something I've never forgotten. She said, wear the sari to the interview. If they don't hire you for who you are, then they don't deserve you. Then we'll find another solution for you, but wear a sari. So the summer job was at Booz Allen Hamilton, not BCG, and I wore the sari, and I got the job. But I want to tell you something that speaks volumes about this country. And I'll tell you, the first job I went to, where I looked like that freak show, there were about 40 people who interviewed for that summer job. They hired one person. They made one offer. They made that offer to me, even though I looked like a freak show. And so, in a way, the country is a meritocracy. Now let me get to your diversity and inclusion topic. So if you act true to yourself and be who you are, but focus on your skills, your courage and confidence, your communication, doors open for you. However, there's no question that the playing field is not level everywhere. There's still work to be done for certain groups that need to be pulled up. So in Pepsico, we have explicit programs to ensure diversity. There's only one problem. When you have a global company, what is diversity? Is it multinational, multi-generational? Is it ethnic diversity as we know it in the United States? So we have a double problem. In every country in which we operate, we have to worry about that country's diversity. And on a global basis, we have to worry about multinational, multi-generational diversity. So we have an interesting challenge. Diversity is one part of it. The second part is inclusion. It's very easy to bring people in the door. How do you now make them feel included and move up the chain? We do a lot of inclusion training, inclusion 1, inclusion 2, inclusion 3, because we believe that we have to constantly educate our managers to make sure they recognize when you're working with a diverse group of people, you have to behave differently and be sensitive to them. This is a journey. By no means are we perfect. We're still learning. We're always discovering mistakes we're making, but I think we've made a lot of progress.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Dean Gilligan, Ms. Nooyi, I think it's been an absolute pleasure thus far. I think we all are better for this event than before. I have a two-part question. I think as a student of finance, and I'm a student at the university, of course, a large multinational like Pepsico relies heavily on organic growth, but a fair bit also comes from inorganic growth. And we can get lost in numbers and synergies and all sorts of fancy things. But as a student of the subject, I feel like cultural assimilation of an acquired company is perhaps one of the biggest challenges. What, in your opinion, is perhaps the right mantra going forward, and how do you approach this entire issue?
And what's your second question?
My second question is, what was your favorite acquisition? I know that there's been a lot that's been said about Quaker Oats and other things like that, but if you could talk about why that was your favorite acquisition, not asking you to name favorites because we all have them here, but if you could just talk a little bit about a deal or an acquisition just from a human perspective, stuff that we didn't read in the papers, it would be enormously helpful. Yeah.
You're absolutely right in saying the cultural assimilation is the toughest part of a deal. You know, we always say that the sexy part of the deal is doing the deal. You know, you feel like you're hot shot, okay? But the difficult part is post-merger integration. And getting the numbers, getting all that ticked and tied is not difficult. It's getting the people in both companies to work together to get all the synergies. So what did we do when we bought Quaker Oats? And you know, we bought Tropicana, we bought Quaker Oats, two different companies, and I'll talk about both. We bought Tropicana in 97. When we bought Tropicana in 97, for the first year, we said anybody who wants to visit Tropicana had to get permission from corporate to go, because we wanted to make sure that that culture of Tropicana, that nutrition culture, the fruit and vegetable culture of Tropicana wasn't tainted by the rest of PepsiCo because it was a small company and the weight of PepsiCo could have overwhelmed it. And then over the first year, we gingerly learned our way through the Tropicana culture. We started sending a few people into Tropicana. We brought people from Tropicana to PepsiCo, and we slowly assimilated it. Okay? So that was one way. In the case of Quaker Oats, it was a much bigger company. Of course, PepsiCo was 6 times as bigger as Quaker Oats, but we had to make the Quaker Oats people feel like it was a merger of equals, so that they didn't feel like they were acquired and they were suppressed. So we worked very, very hard to make, I mean, Roger Enrico was brilliant. He made himself and Bob Morrison co-chairman of the company. That way Bob Morrison was an equal partner with him, and that set a strong symbol, a message to the rest of Quaker Oats that this is a merger of equals. And so the first year or so after a merger is critically important. You have to make sure that you're very, very sensitive because everybody's waiting for the shoe to drop and for them to be thrown out and for the acquiring companies' people to come in. So most acquisitions fail because of cultural reasons, so we tiptoe through this very carefully. In the case of my most favorite acquisition, I love the Tropicana acquisition. I'll tell you why, because when we bought Tropicana, we didn't have a beverage which people consume before 10 a.m. in the morning. Okay? On the 2 a.m. shift, people consume some Mountain Dew, but that didn't count, all right? But, you know, we calculated day part wise, the first PepsiCo beverage that they reached out for was about 10 a.m. And Tropicana was a great acquisition. Quaker Oats, on the other hand, everybody talked about Gatorade, but really the excitement on Quaker Oats was the Quaker brand and business, because you couldn't take Frito-Lay and make a healthy bar out of it. You know, if I sold you a Fritos bar and told you it was healthy, you'd probably get turned off, okay? Or if I told you this Lay's bar is nutritious, you won't believe it, or you may start getting turned off by the Lay's brand. So again, like Tropicana, we needed a food franchise that had credentials in the healthy space. And that's why the Quaker brand name was so powerful and brought a lot of attraction to PepsiCo.
Is it true that you went to the temple the day before the deal got announced?
The day it was announced, yeah, absolutely. I'm big on faith, so yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Very good. Please.
Hello, I'm an exchange student from the Netherlands, and I mean, it's very impressive to see such a great leader here. I have taken a leadership class, actually taught by, I think, the previous business dean, Mr. Gao, and ask you a question about leadership. Like, how are you a leader? Like, what is your leadership style? What are your leadership qualities? How do you motivate your followers, your employees?
Maybe you should ask all my orange-shirted Frito-Lay people here. I don't know. I'll give you a point of view, and if at the break you want to accost any of those people in a brick orange, is that the right word?
Yeah,
Burnt orange.
Burnt orange.
Burnt orange t-shirts, please ask them. I don't think I yet have the perfect formula worked out, but let me tell you what I work on. First, if you want to lead a company like PepsiCo, you have to feel PepsiCo every day. I mean, you've got to feel it in your heart, you've got to feel it in your head. I mean, you've got to be a PepsiCo person, you've got to live it all the time. Second, you've got to make sure that you run the company not just intellectually, but you've also got to run it from a human perspective, okay? And maybe this is one place where I have departed from even the prior CEOs, and maybe it's the fact I'm a female. So let me give you some examples. When I was president and CFO, I cannot tell you the number of times I'd reach out to my CFOs on a personal basis because I wanted to get to know them as people rather than just the position that they were holding. And when I became CEO, one of the practices I started, and this actually came out of an experience I had, which I'll relate to you to tell you what came out. When I became CEO, you know, I became an overnight celebrity in India, right? So I went to Madras to visit my mom. And my father had passed away and my mom was there. So, you know, I went home to stay at home. You know, my mom's got a home. We've got a home in Madras. When I went there, you know, you go for a holiday, you want to rest. My mom would wake me up at 7 o'clock and say, get up, get ready and sit down. I said, why? I don't want to get ready. I'm going to hang around in my pajamas all day. She says, no, 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 there are guests who are going to come. And so I got dressed, jet lagged out of my mind. I'd be sitting in the living room. Strange people would walk in. Absolutely strange. I said, Mom, who's this? That's the next door neighbor's third cousin. So why am I sitting here talking to them? She said, because you will leave, I have to cope with all of them, so you better sit here and say hello. But what they all did, they came in, they say, oh, hi Indra, how are you? They'll go to my mom and say, Mrs. Krishnamurthy, you must be wonderful, you raised such a good kid, aren't you wonderful? So I was just a sideshow. but let me tell you something, it taught me a very valuable lesson which I brought back, and it goes back to leadership and the whole person. It came back to me that every person is a product of their upbringing. And we have never taken the time as leaders to thank the parents of our executives. So when I came back to the United States after this visit, I wrote to the parents of all my direct reports. I wrote to them about this incident, and I said, I'm writing to you to thank you for the gift of XYZ to PepsiCo. This is the job they're doing. Let me tell you what a wonderful job they're doing, and I want to thank you for the wonderful upbringing you gave this person that gave me such an outstanding executive. What did that do? That bonded the person, the executive, closer to PepsiCo. I now have an independent relationship with the parents of all my direct executives. And trust me, if any of them want to do something else other than be in PepsiCo, I am reaching out to the parents. I can tell you. And I'm not joking. This is a very personal relationship, a very personal relationship. I'm illustrating this as one of many examples of leadership is not about just intellectual leading. Leadership is about leading with the heart. Leadership is about getting to know your people as individuals, as people. And leadership is living those values every day. And leadership is about showing your vulnerabilities also. We are people too. I mean, I have kids, I have a husband, I have work-life issues, I have family issues, I have all kinds of issues. Why do I come to work and pretend that I am absolutely perfect? I come to work and I say, I had a scrap with my husband today, I need 15 minutes to cool off. So everybody knows she's a person too. It's okay. So that's what I guess makes me okay.
Regrettably, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, for this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.